Hello everyone. So I recently played a game, my first game of Pillage at a new war games club that's opened up in Plymouth. Only been going about a year, and I haven't got the rules. It was a friend of mine who introduced me to them. So I brought all my terrain along, and he brought all his figures along, and we played a game with the three of us playing Vikings, Anglo-Saxons, and Welsh. Um, Sort of three-way game. It was really good fun. It looked fantastic. Really, you know, nice display. Impressed everybody else at the club who were there that was watching it. And of course, I was interested to compare it to Brethren, which is my current preferred set of rules for the Dark Ages. So I suggested that maybe we should replay the scenario using Brethren at a later date. And I've been rehearsing the rules again, and I realise that it's not really a suitable setup for the rules of Brethren. Now, that's not to say that I prefer one set of rules over the other. I do prefer one set of rules over the other. I prefer Brethren. It's not really to say that Brethren, is a kind of unsuitable set of rules to play at a war games club. It's just that the size of the game was quite large, and Brethren is a much more kind of detailed, granular type of war games rules where you're moving figures individually. Kind of, you do have heroes who are able to activate groups of figures, so it's not a continual one side moves one piece, another side moves another piece. And in fact, when you've got to the point of the turn where it doesn't really matter, doesn't have any influence or effect on the opponent if you move what sequence you move your figures in, then both sides can move the rest of their figures simultaneously. So the game does flow quite quickly. But all the same, this club only meets for about 3 or 4 hours on a Friday evening. It's not really sufficient time to play the type of game we played using the pillage rules in an evening. So I've kind of given up on that idea. But I have been playing to rehearse the rules, this setup here that you can see. I'm actually trying to recreate the Battle of Stamford Bridge, and I've played one game of it so far. It was really good fun, so I thought I would play another game out and present it as a sort of bat rep. So without further ado, I've kind of invented my own scenario. There is a scenario in the rule book where you have to nominate a VIP or figure in each side, and when that figure is killed, that's the end of the game. That's the opponent has won. Not necessarily killed, actually. That's an interesting point. That it's actually much easier to remove the figure if you're choosing a hero, which you will do, a combat hero, which you will do because they have a lot more health and can survive more wounds. So they've got a greater survivability on the tabletop. The best way to remove those figures from the table is to get them to fail a morale test, in which case they simply run away. That's not easy in itself, but it's easier than striking 3 or 4 wounds onto them and killing them off that way. They are quite robust figures, difficult to remove in combat. So that's basically the scenario. Is I'm using this I think it's called VIP Takedown or something in the rule book, but I've modified it for the scenario. So what you're looking at here is Stamford Bridge itself over the River Derwent, and on the other side of the river there, the King Harold Godwinson's army has surprised the Vikings, who are on this bank of the River Derwent. There's Harold Hardrada there with a small group of figures. They are there essentially to collect tribute from the city of York. And the majority of as I say, Harold Godwinson has surprised Harold Hardrada. He's got all his army about to cross the bridge there, whereas the majority of Hardrada's army are off the table, still guarding the ships at Rickle on the River Ouse, about 25 kilometres south of here. So the alterations I made to the scenario is that I have a single berserker figure positioned on the bridge, and until he's removed from the bridge, the rest of the game can't take place. And during that time, I'm going to be rolling to see what the chances are of the remaining figures coming on the table. So essentially, for each turn, I'm going to roll a d10 for each figure. There are 34 figures, Viking figures, not on the table. In turn 1, on a d10, they have to roll 1 to come on. In turn 2, they have to roll a 2 or a 1, and so on. So by the 10th, so they are guaranteed to come on by the 10th turn. But by that stage, the Anglo-Saxons are obviously hoping to have removed the berserker from the bridge and stormed across, broken through this group. You're only allowed 2 figures abreast on the bridge, I'm saying, and getting through and shattering this shield wall here in front of Harold Hardrada and killing or removing Hardrada from the table. In the game I previously rehearsed, the Anglo-Saxons failed miserably to do that because the Vikings managed to get most of their force on the table quite quickly, and the big mistake that I made was to actually bring Hardrada over the bridge, which then made him vulnerable, and all his housecarls were cut down around him, and then he lost morale, failed a morale throw and ran away essentially. So it was actually the Vikings who won, which is an unhistorical result. So I'm going to change my tactics a little bit this time, not bring Harold Godwinson over the bridge. There is another combat hero figure there, I think you can see, which is a battle priest. He's going to be the one mainly leading the assault, leaving Godwinson safe on the other side, out of the zone of influence of the Vikings. So they're going to find it much harder to get to him and remove him from the table. And the other adjustment I'm making to the scenario is that the Vikings, until the berserker is dead, the Vikings are always going to have the initiative. Only start rolling for initiative once that chap there has been killed, and that gives him a chance to prepare. There's an action. You can spend an action point to prepare, and that makes him more resilient against charges and so on. Okay, right, so let's get on with the game. I'm also, as I say, Brethren is a much more granular game than Pillage. It's far more, which I really like. It's far more figure centered. So every figure, what what he's armed with, whether he's got a shield, whether he, whether he's using an axe or a spear or a sword, what quality of troop he is, what nationality it is. It all matters. It all changes the dice that they roll. So there's a lot of dice rolling and different factors applying to different types of dice depending on the weapon used and so on. So there's a lot of that you have to go through. It takes time, so I'm not going to show all of that in the battle report. I'm just going to show you the end of each turn and what's happened in each turn and so on. And both rule sets, Pillage and Brethren, do give a very nice narrative game, but the narrative in Brethren is kind of built up from the individual narratives of each individual figure that build up into an entire narrative. So it's too time consuming to show you all that on the camera. So I'm just going to give you a little summary at the end of each turn. So here we go. Well, that did not go well for the Vikings at all. At the end of the turn, the Berserker is out of the game, struck down by a charge from 2 Anglo-Saxon housecarls armed with Dane axes that managed to fell him with one charge. Effectively, he lost both his health points from wounds sustained from their blows, and only one figure rolled successfully to enter the table. So the corner of the table is just here. So I've chosen to put on this female shield maiden, Viking shield maiden here. It's meant to be Lagatha. It's from Bad Squid O'Gain's Annie Norman, one of Annie Norman's figures. It's meant to be Lagatha, who's obviously out of context, out of time, the time period for the Battle of Stamford Bridge, but I like the figure so much, and so she's just going to represent a single shield maiden coming on the table. Her statistics are the same as for the Viking raiders, so she's armoured with sword and shield and so on. Okay, on to turn 2. So this looks like it might have a totally different outcome from the game I played earlier. Right, so on the bridge, one Viking and one Anglo-Saxon were killed in a melee that happened at the end of the bridge there. So Vikings are still blocking the end of the bridge there. The Anglo-Saxons are beginning to pour across now though, but some of the archers you can see there by the bank of the river did attempt to shoot at the group that Harold Hardrada was in, failed, but the Viking leader reacted by making a group run order and running back out of range of those missiles so that he could remain safe. And the intention now is to abandon, hope that group at the bridge can hold the Anglo-Saxons up still further and form a defensive line again further back behind the cover of this stone wall here, which will help. And in the meantime, quite a large number of Vikings enter the table. The shield maiden was able to run a fair distance towards the group, so that actually helps in that they're closer together now as well. And there's a large group of Vikings on the table now, including the other hero, who's a combat hero, and that helps as well in that he's able to give group orders to anything within 6 inches of him, which means that they'll be able to move, as a more coherent group towards Howard Hardrada. So it's not lost. The bridge has almost certainly been lost, but the battle by no means lost. Okay, I thought I'd just give you a shot at the end of the movement phase of turn 3, so there hasn't been any combat yet, just to show you a situation with quite a considerable number now of reinforcements for the Vikings arriving on the table, and it does kind of open the possibility that if they can get quite a large force on the table, they might outnumber the Anglo-Saxons on this side of the River Derwent and be able to drive them back. I should have said right at the beginning of one of the scenario settings is that the River Derwent is uncrossable other than at the bridge. So the longer that that small group of Vikings can hold the end of the bridge, the more likely it is that there'll be a considerable force of Vikings able to cut whatever beachhead the Anglo-Saxons make on this side of the river. So I'll just show you the situation at the bridge. Okay, so there's the situation at the end of the bridge before I roll for all the various melees. So there's an individual Viking here who's attempting to take out the battle priest, but he's got 2 housecarls attacking him from either side, so he's basically trapped there now. So if he loses but isn't killed, he can't withdraw, so that will then turn into a desperate fight, where he'll fight to the death now, but his rolls his attack factors will increase and his defence factors will diminish for each round of combat that takes place. So it does make for a very interesting battle. And then here there were 2 Anglo-Saxons off the end of the bridge now, fighting with these 2 Vikings here. So they are kind of pushing the Vikings back from their defence of the end of the bridge. But I'll roll all the dice now, show you what happens. Well, that is the stuff of which sagas are written. Really reinforces my love of these rules, but it took about 20 minutes, I think, to just play through all the various dice rolls, but came out with a spectacular result. The 2 melees that are going on at the end of the bridge ended without result, in a way, that there was no casualties inflicted, but the various figures were just pushed back. 1 Anglo-Saxon was pushed back and 1 Viking was pushed back. But here on the bridge, this chap here was an absolute hero. He was fighting against the battle priest and 2 housecarls with Dane axes. He managed to kill all 3 of them. The battle priest has got 4 casualties on it now, which is its entire health. So the battle priest is dead, and the Saxon housecarls were both killed outright. But it was a really long, brutal fight, and the desperation rule, effectively, if you lose the melee but can't withdraw, then in the next round the fighting goes on, and in the next round you add 1 attack dice, but you lose 1 defence. And at one point the Saxons were rolling something like 18 dice against 2 for the Viking raider, but the Viking raider still had the ability to add +1 to his dice rolls and get a re-roll because he's got a weapon in both hands, He's fighting with a sword, so that gives him a +1 on his dice rolls in the beginning, and he just was constantly rolling fives and sixes, and therefore effectively rolling sixes, and whittling down that amount of dice that the Saxons were rolling to the point where they were rolling the same number and then less, and then finally beating them, and then overcoming the defences. That was rolling then to see if his hits were wounding, overcoming the defences because the defences of the Saxons were slowly going down, one per round of fighting, ended up killing all three of them. So that might be a pivotal point in this battle. But anyway, let's carry on now with turn 4, see how it goes. Okay, so this is the end of the movement phase of turn 4. The fighting on the bridge is still desperate. That heroic Viking raider once again is sort of trapped between opponents, so has nowhere to retreat, so it's another fight to the death on the bridge there. But in the distance, Hardrada is perfectly safe behind the shield wall. Well, it isn't actually a shield wall at this point. I suppose you could call it a shield wall because he didn't move, so he did have the ability to command a shield wall to occur there, but it's not serving any defensive role at the moment because they're far from being threatened. But in the distance you can see a huge stream of Vikings now entering the table, so I think a counter attack is on the cards very shortly, because there is unfortunately it's all hidden behind trees. Behind that tree there's only a couple of Anglo-Saxons actually on that bank of the River Derwent, so they could easily be pinched off with a determined counter-attack. So I'll now do the rolls for all the melees over there and show you the results of that. So that heroic Viking was finally cut down. He did manage to cause one more casualty on the Anglo-Saxons, but he is now dead, and there's one Viking left to confront the horde of Anglo-Saxons, this guy here. So I think now is the good time for Hardrada there to charge back into this space here. He will put himself at some risk, but hopefully he can get there before too many of the Anglo-Saxons get across the bridge. Okay, there you see the situation before the rolling of dice for combat. So one single Viking raider there, doing his best to hold off the Anglo-Saxons, whilst in the background Harold Hardrada and a fairly large group making a counter charge, and they will soon be supported by the bulk of the Viking host. There's only about 4 or 5 more figures to bring onto the table now. Haven't rolled successfully to come on, so once again I'll let you know the result of the combat. Well, the Viking was cut down, so the bridge is now open, so a lot may depend now on who gets priority in the next turn, so we'll see what happens. Well, as luck would have it, the Vikings got priority, and Harold Hardrada was able to order a charge. I'm trying to spot where he is. Oh, he's behind the... Can't see him on the camera shot because he's behind the standard there. So what's happening, in fact, they just had enough distance to reach the end of the bridge, so they've choked it off again. So there's one single housecarl fighting alone there, and the rest of them are held back still on the bridge, which is promising for the Vikings. And meanwhile, in the distance, all the reinforcements are coming on. There's still a few stragglers to come on the table. And once again, got some dice rolling now, and then I'll reveal the outcome of that. Okay, so there were 3 separate combats, 1-on-1, ended in 3 deaths, 2 Viking, 1 Anglo-Saxon. So the Anglo-Saxons came out slightly better. Now, in the morale phase of the game, what that would allow you to do is to select, the winning side would select a figure within 6 inches of a hero on their side, and then all the figures within 6 inches of that selected figure have to roll for morale. So this is where you begin to remove figures that aren't actually casualties, but unfortunately for the Anglo-Saxons, they don't have, because of the congestion on the bridge and the fact that the battle priest has been killed, they don't have any hero figures within 6 inches of an enemy figure. They've got 2 heroes, which I think you can see. I think I might, yeah. They have got 2 heroes here and here. The standard is an inspiration specialist, and the horn is a fear specialist. So the horn is no use, even though it is 12 inches from the end of the bridge, which is the effective range of those capabilities. The horn is no use because the horn reduces the enemy morale, but they can't call a morale check in that area. However, if the Anglo-Saxons begin to lose, the inspiration of the banner will raise their morale in that same area where they might have to check morale. So there is still a possibility that, you know, that standard will have some control, but the only way they're going to be able to cause morale checks on the enemy is either to bring Harold Godwinson up and therefore make him vulnerable, or to bring one of those 2 figures across the river. I think it would probably be safer to make it the hornblower at the moment, but he's got to negotiate his way through all this congestion. So they're a little bit sort of backed up on the bridge there now. And it does mean as well that the Anglo-Saxons are beginning to clear the end of the bridge. Might be able to get off the end of the bridge in the next turn. Again, it all depends on who wins priority in the next phase. Well, once again, the Vikings won priority, so they have just managed to choke off the end of the bridge. They've got 2 Vikings there on the end of the bridge fighting these 2 Anglo-Saxons, one of whom is feared armed with a bow, which means he fights with the default weapon of a knife in melee, which is -1, so he's not likely to survive. And there's another fight going. Oh no, there are 2 fights going on here. One between the single housecarl who's managed to get over onto the opposite bank against the Viking raider, and here is an Anglo-Saxon armed with a sword and shield fighting a Viking raider with an axe. The Vikings have some kind of axe speciality for their faction, so they get to re-roll a failed dice, and also the shield maiden is now in combat, so it's 2 against 1 there. So again, roll all the dice, and did I say there's only 1 figure still not on the table? There's a bit of a kind of stream of reinforcements making their way steadily onto the battlefield here. Still one figure to enter the table yet though. Right then, one casualty per side, so no morale check possible in this turn. And remarkably, the feared member with the bow managed to push back the Viking raider, so he wasn't one of the casualties. And I haven't got anywhere near enough casualty markers, but as I said on a previous video, I like to try and put down dead figures on the table just to represent the carnage, because otherwise the table just empties. I'm steadily sort of painting up a lot more markers, but they only serve as a sort of table decoration in a way, rather than any functional purpose to them. But I do think they make the game look a little bit more interesting, give it a bit of a narrative in their own right. Okay, so if the Anglo-Saxons win priority the next turn, I think the first thing, obvious thing for them to do is for this guy to aim and loose an arrow at that chap, see if he can hit him. Otherwise he's just going to be attacked again and won't get the opportunity to loose an arrow. Well, the Anglo-Saxons did get priority, but the shot missed, so that feared member is once again engaged in melee with a now increasingly angry Viking raider. The situation now is that enough of the Viking reinforcements have arrived to surround the small number of Saxons who have got across the bridge, and also to block the bridge off and slowly fight their way back. But Harold Hardrada himself is actually engaged in hand-to-hand combat this turn with by a lone Saxon housecarl armed with a Dane axe, who might be able to do some damage on him, but he's unlikely to inflict 3 wounds on Hardrada, who's got the health of 3. So there's a good chance Hardrada's going to survive. If he's not killed, then that means that it's up to the Vikings now to push their way across the bridge and attempt to either demoralise Harold Godwinson into leaving the table or to engage him in melee. So it's going to be a long, hard slog. But anyway, what I'll do next, all the Vikings are now on the table, by the way. What I'll do next is work out the various results of all the melees and show you that. So the upshot of all that was that this solitary housecarl with a Dane axe, was totally surrounded by Vikings, managed to fend them all off and very nearly inflicted a wound on Harold Hardrada. But as it is, he's just cleared a space with his sweeping axe around him at the moment. The shield maiden, let me try and get a view of that because she's concealed behind a tree at the moment. Yeah, the shield maiden, the sort of Lagatha figure, as you can see, was cut down by another housecarl, so she is dead, and that feared bowman was also cut down, so it's 1 dead per side again, so no morale checks or anything like that. As I said earlier, all the figures are now on the table, so it's just a matter of slogging on. It's going to be quite a hard fought contest, I think, now. At one stage it looked like the Vikings were going to be overrun quite quickly. Here you can see the situation around Harold Hardrada, who is fighting this solitary housecarl with a Dane axe, who is beset on all sides I think something I haven't discussed about the rules in this particular back rep is that each of the heroes, the combat heroes that is, has a speciality, and Hardrada's is a melee specialist, which allows him once per game to roll 3 extra attack dice in combat, and also give 3 other what are described as units, but they're effectively figures, who are in melee within 12 inches of him, an additional dice as well. So I think he's going to use that speciality whilst it's still there, and do that, but not add 3 dice to himself, but the other 3 units within 12 inches of him I'm going to give to the other melees that are going on between him and the bridge. So I'll roll all those dice now and show you the outcome of that. Well, that added ability did for the housecarls on the Viking side of the river. They are both dead. And on the bridge, 1 Anglo-Saxon and 1 one Anglo-Saxon and 1 Viking dead. So doing the arithmetic there, that means that there are 3, let's see, 1, 2, 3 Anglo-Saxon dead and only 1 Viking, which means that the Viking side can now begin to call on the Anglo-Saxons to take casualties, because they have heroes within 6 inches of an opposing figure. So let's just see what I'm going to do there. So I think I've got all the relevant figures in shot here. So you have to select a hero. So I'm going to select this combat hero here. Pick a figure within 6 inches of him, which I've already measured, is going to be that figure there, and any figure within 6 inches of him has to take a morale check, and that includes Harold Godwinson, who is just, so it's effectively, it's all the figures on the bridge, that figure there and that figure there. Now that figure there adds to the morale of his side, but this figure here detracts from the figures of the opponent's side up to 12 inches. And what have I done? Here's the measure here. So 12 inches from that figure there is effectively all the figures there. So that means all the figures there have their standard morale. Those 4 figures there, which include Harold Godwinson, have a boosted morale from the flag. And I'm going to roll dice. What you do is roll 2 dice, and you have to be equal to or below the morale of whatever figure you're rolling for. So normally Harold Godwinson would have a morale of 10. It's boosted to 11 by that figure there. So I have to roll, with 2d6, I have to roll a 12 in order for him to leave the table. And that will be the end of the game if that does happen. But it's pretty slim odds, but it can happen. So let me just try and point the camera down at the dice tray. All the other figures I'll roll off camera, but this one is relevant to the outcome of the game, I suppose. No, so he's fine. Right, so I'll do all the other figures off camera and then show you which ones have left the table. That's thinned out the Anglo-Saxons on the bridge. 2 feared, both with bows, and 1 housecarl who rolled a double 6. decided to leap off the bridge rather than face the Vikings. So this is how the game, begins to turn quite quickly. The Vikings have definitely got the upper hand now, and whereas Hardrada isn't threatened at the moment, there is now always going to be that constant possibility that Harold Godwinson will lose heart and leave the table. So the fight has now ended up with all the fighting happening on the bridge, and there is such a press from both armies from behind that anyone who is forced to withdraw from a melee by the dice result has nowhere to withdraw to. So in other words, the fighting now will become desperate until the death, and the Vikings certainly have the upper hand, especially given the fact that the Anglo-Saxons lost that battle priest, because they have more heroes effectively now than the Anglo-Saxons, and Godwinson is on the bridge, so he's within that sphere where he might be forced to take morale, whereas Harold Hardrada is back safely out of harm's way. So the Anglo-Saxons are really going to have to push the fight back across the bridge if they want to win this game. So once again, I'm going to go through a round of melee off camera and then show you how things have developed. Not a good round for the Vikings. They lost all the melees, so they've actually lost 3 figures. The bridge is entirely in the hands of the Anglo-Saxons now, but in terms of morale, the closest hero the Anglo-Saxons have to the enemy is Harold Godwinson himself, and he's not within 6 inches, so he can't require the Vikings to take a morale check at this point. So the game goes on, but it looks like the Anglo-Saxons might possibly step off the bridge onto the Viking side of the river again. Well, once again, the Vikings lost both the combats in that turn, so the Anglo-Saxons now have the possibility of one of those figures stepping off the bridge onto the Viking side, and once again Harold is just out of touching distance of getting the Vikings to roll for morale. So but the Anglo-Saxons seem to be turning the tide once again. It's a sort of to and fro battle, but as you can probably tell, the light, I was using a lamp and the battery's just run out on it. The light's pretty poor now, so I'm going to stop for the evening, I think, and pick the game up again tomorrow morning. So another day then, the lighting has improved, and carrying on with this fight at the end of the bridge. So not much difference really. The Saxons won priority, but because they're so close to one another now, you can't charge within 3 inches, so the charge would fail. So it's basically just individuals moving up to one another and slogging it out. I've changed my tactics slightly over here, so I realised that there are 2 bowmen here who were trying to pick off the hero here. So I've put 3 figures here, which is the minimum you need to form a shield wall. So they are, each turn will be guarding the rest of them from any arrows that come over. So I'll roll through the dice now in that melee, those various melees, and give you the result of that. Well, the battle swung in the Anglo-Saxons' favour in that round of melee. The Vikings lost 2 casualties, and now, as a result of forming that shield wall there, there is now a figure within 6 inches of Harold Godwinson. So it is now possible for the Anglo-Saxons to require the Vikings to take a morale check on all the figures within 6 inches of that figure, which is a considerable number. It doesn't include Harold Hardrada, but there's a lot of figures there that could potentially be removed from the table, and that would clear a gap, a space for the Anglo-Saxons to pour over the bridge. So I'm just going to put the tape measure there just to demarcate where the figures that need to take morale are. Roll all the dice off camera and show you the effect of that. Well, dramatic result. The Vikings had 5 figures removed, including their hornblower, which is a critical element in the reducing the morale of the opposing side. So you can see there's a bit of a space cleared there now for the Anglo-Saxons to fill, and I've also, in regard to the casualty figures I've been painting up, I'm using like walking wounded figures to represent figures that are being removed by morale. So I got that rather nice pair of figures of characters who are walking away from the battle, which is kind of how I think of the morale phase. They're not just suddenly dematerialising and disappearing from the table. They're withdrawing because they've had enough, or they're wounded, and so on. So that's how I'm representing that stage of the game on the tabletop. So it's quite important now, once again, who gets priority in the next turn. So I'll move all the figures and show you the result before I run through the melee. Right, so 2 Saxon housecarls took advantage of the space to actually get quite a long way forward. So there's one there and another one there, and they are now surrounded by, they're right in the midst of the Viking host, trying to break their way through to Harold Hardrada. So they are surrounded and will be fighting a desperate fight, just as they were on the bridge. There's no retreat or withdrawal, and that sort of greater movement forward did give the Vikings the opportunity to pour onto the bridge again. So you've got the other Viking hero here on the bridge, and another one just at the foot of the bridge there. So effectively they're blocking the bridge again, and definitely in this round, this other he's a combat hero, so he's going to roll that once per game ability that Hardrada himself did earlier, to roll some extra attack dice in this round of melee, because that is definitely a crucial turning point in the game again. It's really backwards and forwards, this battle. So once again I roll the dice and just give you the result of that. Well, the Vikings came out on top, but it wasn't as overwhelming as it might have been after playing that ability. In fact, the combat hero, it's a melee specialist, which gives him that ability to, you can be melee or command specialist. The melee specialist has that ability once per game to roll extra dice and give extra dice to the fights going on around him. But he was actually pushed back off the the bridge and took one wound. So he's got 3 health, so he can take 2 more wounds before he's killed. And there were 2 Saxons killed, one here and one here, who was surrounded, but the other housecarl who was surrounded fought off all the other surrounding Vikings. So again, similar situation to earlier, he's cleared a sort of space around him there where the Vikings were forced to withdraw. But now, because there were 2 Saxon casualties, the Vikings can require the Saxons to take a morale check, and this is where the loss of that horn is going to hamper the Vikings in that they can't diminish the Saxon morale. So it's just, in fact, it's that will be a boosted morale because the inspiration from the standard there will help. But anyway, we'll roll the dice, see how that goes. So 2 feared bowmen were removed, one here and one there. But none of the housecarls come off, so that's what you'd expect, because with the inspiration, the boost of morale from the standard, the housecarls' morale goes up to 11, which means only a double 6 would remove them from the table, whereas the feared bowman had a morale of 7 boosted up to 8, so more likely that some of those would have been removed. So on to the next turn. Right, there we are then. So next round of melee about to take place, but just thought I'd show you this to point out that I'm trying to create a bit of a space here by moving the Saxon figures over to the right of the bridge so that Harold Godwinson can make his way through. So it's building up to a possibility that this combat hero and Harold Godwinson might fight. If Godwinson's killed, then that's the end of the game. But if he succeeds, then he'll be on the other side of the river, and there's a potential for a confrontation between himself and Hardrada, possibly. There's one solitary housecarl fighting surrounded on close to Hardrada, but he's not likely to get through to Hardrada. But Godwinson might make it. So I'll again roll the dice and give you the outcome of that. 1 Saxon casualty in that round of combat. The housecarl here remains alive despite being beset on all sides, and that means that the Vikings can now require the Saxons to take a morale check, so they're going to do it centred on Godwinson again. So it'd be a similar situation, unlikely to cause much loss, but there's always a double 6 chance that Godwinson might be removed from the table and the game lost. Okay, so here you can see the numbers on the bridge being thinned out. There were 4 figures removed due to morale. 3 of them were feared, the ones with the lower morale anyway, but one of the housecarls did roll a double 6 and was removed. It wasn't Harold Godwinson, but it was a housecarl. And Godwinson himself actually rolled 11, which would normally be sufficient for him to be removed because he's only got a morale of 10, but he's right beside the standard there, which raises his morale up by 1, so he just scraped through. So it shows you that that is a possible way for opponents to win the game is to to get a high dice roll on the morale check and win that way. So the same thing might possibly happen with Hardrada, but it's in the balance now, I would say. Okay, on to the next turn. Right, well, just about to roll the dice for the combat phase of the turn. The bridge now is entirely filled again with Saxons, but the Vikings did get priority, and were, because they've got the combat hero, they were able to do a group move, so have blocked the end of the bridge off again. And Harold has actually shifted to the other side of the bridge to give some more support, allow some more support with spears which have reach, to go behind that housecarl there who is fighting that Viking combat hero. But over here, this housecarl is still pushing forward towards Hardrada, who keeps stepping back in order to allow his raiders and so on to do all the fighting. But I'm beginning to think that is wise, because Vikings don't really want to throw the game away by losing Hardrada. It's unlikely that would happen because he has got 3 health, whereas the housecarl's only got 1. So the housecarl's got to beat him 3 times effectively, or get 3 winning dice. That are successful at then wounding him. So it's unlikely. So I think cut my rambling short, what I'm going to do is sort of bring the game to a head. So if he survives, then I'll certainly set them off one against the other while all the others watch, which strikes me would have been the more likely heroic thing that the Vikings would have done. And over here, well, just keep playing this struggle here, this desperate fight here, because there's nowhere for them to withdraw, but with the aim eventually of getting Godwinson and that combat hero to fight if they both survive, so that the game might come to a head over here as well. Right, okay, so I'll let you know how all that goes. Right, so in that round there were 2 casualties on both sides, so no morale check. One of the Viking casualties, by the way, was actually hit with an arrow, by an arrow, fired from the opposite bank. So that sort of swayed the game a little bit. But anyway, the Saxon housecarl here, still alive, fighting off the surrounding Vikings. So I'll stick to my word and say that we kind of create an artificial game within a game in a way, and have Harold Hardrada face off against him, because the Saxon has, I'm sure, in a real battle, they would have recognised his courage and given him the honour of dying under Hardrada's blade rather than being cut down by all this surrounding mob. So we'll play that as a little enhancement to the game. And over here, the Viking combat hero on the bridge actually took another wound, so he's only got 1 health left. He did win the combat eventually, but he took a wound himself in the process. So it's getting close to the point where Godwinson will probably be able to confront him, but Godwinson's got much greater chance of winning that individual fight when that comes about, because he's got 4 health, because you get an extra health for being mounted on a horse. Right, so on to the next turn. Right, there we are then. So that is the situation on the bridge before the dice rolling for the melees. So it's all going to be, there's no room for withdrawal, it's all going to be desperate fighting. But where are they? Over here, I've just paired off the Howard Hardrada is fighting alone against that brave housecarl who's cut his way right the way through to the back of the Viking army. So what I'll do is when I come to roll that combat, I'll actually show you the dice rolling. It'll give you a sort of slight idea of how the the dice rolling works if you haven't seen that on any of my previous videos. Because if Hardrada were to lose, then that would be the end of the game, because it is meant to be the sort of VIP takedown scenario. It's highly unlikely that he will, but it might happen, you never know. But I'll do the dice rolling on the bridge first of all, and then come to that in a moment. Disaster for the Vikings on the bridge. Their combat hero was killed. He'd already taken 2 wounds, and he took another wound in that fight, and consequently is dead. And the other Viking on the left-hand side also lost his life. So now all we have to do is play out on camera the dice rolling between Hardrada and the housecarl. Okay, so this is the fight I'm going to show you the dice rolling for. So I'll take a still of that and then point the camera at the dice tray and talk you through the dice rolling. Right, so Hardrada has 3 attacks and the housecarl only has 2, I believe. Just check that. Put it down. 99% sure anyway, but just make sure I don't make any mistakes in this crucial fight. Yeah, so the housecarl has 2 attack dice. Both of them are using swords, and they're both in the categories of sort of higher fighters, which gives them a +1 on their dice rolls. So that is the only considerations you have to make at the moment. All the dice are +1. Okay, so Hardrada has got 3 dice that outrank the housecarl right from the start. Oh, excuse me. Now, the Saxon housecarls are very heavily armoured. They have a defence of 4, which means I have to roll, with those 3 successful dice, I have to roll a 5 or a 6 in order to wound. However, he's also carrying a shield which gives him +1 defence. So in other words, I've got to roll a 6 in order to be able to inflict 1 wound on him, which will be sufficient to kill him because he's only got a health of 1. And haven't done it. So had he been in that press on the bridge, it would have continued into another round of melee. But as it is, all it means is he withdraws an inch and we can continue the fight into the next turn. But in the meantime, we've got to roll for morale on the Viking side because they've lost 2 casualties in the other rounds of combat. And the Vikings lost another 3 figures in the morale phase, including a raider, who's the equivalent rank of a housecarl, a raider who rolled a double 6. So it's just so finely balanced. I just really like these rules. They produce kind of dramatic results, but they're also it's very even. This whole game seems to be really balanced. But anyway, on to the next turn. So that's the end of the movement phase, and this is the situation on the bridge. So Harold Godwinson not quite in the fighting yet, but soon will be. The Viking standard there actually took a hit from arrows fired from those guys there on the opposite bank, but he has got 2 health, so he can still take one more. Well, it will take one more wound to kill him, and then the battle between single combat between those two, Hardrada and the Housecarl, will continue. So again, I'll show you the dice rolls for that after I've done the dice rolls for all the other melees. Right, so it's 1 casualty each on the bridge, so balanced at the moment. So depending on what happens now in this individual combat between those two will depend on whether a morale check is necessary. So once again, Hardrada's rolling 3 dice, the Housecarl 2, +1 to both sets of dice. And there are 2 dice there that outmatch the Anglo-Saxons' dice, so that effectively there are 2 hits, and again needing 6s to kill. No. So once again, the Housecarl is just pushed back. Right, so Harold Godwinson is now coming to blows with this Viking raider there. So what I'll do is I'll show you the dice rolls for that fight as well, as these are critical now. Not quite sure what order to do it in. So yeah, I'll show you some dice rolls of that fight first of all. There are other fights going on around them, but I'm going to call that a desperate fight because there's nowhere for either party to withdraw to. So it'll be a more interesting dice roll. So again, I'll take a still of that and have it in the corner of the screen whilst showing you the dice rolls. Okay, so Harold Godwinson has 4 attack dice. He's also using a sword, which means it's +1 to those 4 dice. Behind him is a spearman, a Housecarl with a spear, so the spear will give an additional dice, but there's not +1 to that dice. The Danish raider is fighting with a Dane axe, which gives him 4 attack dice. However, he doesn't get +1 modifier to those dice, but equally behind him is another spearman, which will give him 1 additional dice. So 5 dice each, but the orange dice are +1. Okay, so immediately you can see you can't modify up from a 6, so there are 2 6s there on the Anglo-Saxon side and a 5 which goes up to a 6. So there are 3 winning dice there. So the Viking raider with the Dane axe only has a defense of 3, so 4, 5 or 6 will kill him, and there's 1 5 there, so he dies. Now in the fight between Hardrada and the Housecarl, it's 3 dice for Hardrada, 2 for the Housecarl, +1s to everything, so that sort of balances out. And the Housecarl has rolled a 6 there, which outmatches everything else. So the Housecarl has actually won this bout, Now he's got to roll against Hardrada's defence, which is 4 plus 1 for the shield. So again, 6 to kill. No. So Hardrada is just pushed back. And in other fighting, the only other casualty was actually on the Anglo-Saxon side, and it was another significant one. It was the hornblower, who was just there, who has now been removed from the table. He took 2 wounds, which was sufficient to kill him. So another support hero off the table. So the Anglo-Saxons had priority, and that means that Godwinson was able to do a group command to move forward on the bridge. So they progressed quite a long way further forward on the bridge. So they are beginning to gain foothold on the bridge again, maybe get off it onto the other side. And also Godwinson is in a one-on-one fight now. It is a desperate battle, but he's on a one-on-one fight with a less well-equipped Viking raider who's only got 2 attack, armed with a spear, and has only got 2 attack dice, so he'll probably be able to cut his way through there. And then once I've done all the dice rolling for that, I'll show you the dice rolling for that individual combat there. In the fighting on the bridge, the Vikings have lost 2 casualties and the Anglo-Saxons 1. So now we'll do some dice rolling for that individual combat again. 3 dice against 2, plus 1s to everything, but that equals out. So there's a 6 there, and the 2 5s go up to 6s. That means we re-roll those 3 successful dice. And this time there are 2 2s there, which go up to 3s, so we re-roll those. And again we re-roll those because they're both 5s. And this time the housecarl has 1, so he has to get 6 in order to wound Hardrada, and he doesn't, so Hardrada just gets pushed back again. So that did mean that the Vikings had to take a morale check, but all the figures passed successfully, so no figures were removed through morale, so it's on to the next turn. So here we are at the end of the movement phase of the next turn, and Harold Godwinson is still pushing forward, cutting his way through, nearly off of the bridge. The one problem the Anglo-Saxons might have is that the majority of the figures that they have left are of a lower quality. There are fewer housecarls now, but a lot more, there's a greater proportion of feared because of the way the army was deployed at the beginning of the game. Whereas with the Vikings, they came on as a mix, because they were coming on randomly. So the Vikings still do have a good proportion of raiders in their army. So although the numbers are diminishing, the quality of the Viking troops is being maintained. So that might tell eventually. And then of course there's also the question of the individual combat between Hardrada and the housecarl there, which will carry on playing as a sort of separate game within a game. Okay, 1 figure lost from each side at the end of the bridge there. So now we'll do the dice rolling for that individual contest there. So it's 3 for Hardrada, 2 for the housecarl. It's plus 1s to everything across the board, so I can discount that. And the housecarl has got 2 successful dice there, So he needs to roll 6 in order to beat Hardrada's defence, and he rolls 2 6s. So that's not enough to kill Hardrada, but that is highly dangerous now for Hardrada, because he has a health of 3, so he only has 1 health left. So he's now fighting almost on an equal footing with the housecarl. That could be a game changer there. So Harold Godwinson and the Saxons won the initiative again, so they're pushed further forward again. Okay, this time around 2 Vikings killed, including the standard bearer, the Viking standard bearer, so they've lost the last of their support heroes. So the only hero they have left on the table now is Hardrada himself. And we'll roll the dice to see how that fight goes with the housecarl, who both housecarl and Hardrada are now on 1 health each, so a successful wound will kill the opponent. Right, Hardrada really took a risk, or I took a risk on his behalf, playing this game within a game. It might have been a foolish thing to do, and in fact, look at that, the Anglo-Saxon has got a successful dice there, so they've got to get 6 to wound, and they don't. So Hardrada survives, gets pushed back again, and we're on to the next round of the game. So let's just show you who gets priority. Is going to be quite important. So orange is Saxon, white Viking. You re-roll draws, and it's definitely, emphatically, the Saxons who have priority. Right, so that has given Harold Godwinson the opportunity to break out onto the Viking side of the river. There he is, and also he hasn't moved his full movement distance, so that he could also give a group command to these 3 figures here, who are still within 6 inches of him, to move up to confront these Vikings here. So at this point, this is a crisis point now for the Vikings. So Hardrada is going to abandon this fight here. It was a bit vainglorious, really, that whole thing. He's severely weakened now from the wounds he's received, but he is going to run towards Harold Godwinson. He might get sufficient to reach him. It's not the same as a charge, so it doesn't matter. He's not declaring a charge where he'll get modifiers to his dice rolls in combat. But if he can run into contact with Godwinson, then all the better. But now it's going to be a fight between as many of the army, as can join in the combat again. No more of this individual combat. So let's just show you. Basically, the run is just 6 inches plus the roll of a d6. So 6 inches plus 3 inches is 9 inches. Is that I doubt very much. It looks more like a foot distance to me, but 9 inches will get him to about there. Okay, now I'm going to do the rest of the movements and show you the final positions before we roll for combat. Okay, so this is how it's ended up at the end of the movement phase. The housecarl who was fighting Hardrada actually rolled a higher dice roll than him, so was able to run, catch him up, so that fight continues. Godwinson is now surrounded on all sides by the Vikings who have seen the peril that their king is in, That fight will be a desperate fight for Godwinson. If Godwinson loses, he will have to continue fighting until he can win one of the back rounds of melee against, what's it, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 figures in total. Here the fighting goes on as normal, so I'll roll all this off camera and then roll these two fights on camera to show you how they go. We're in the fighting on the end of the bridge. There's 1-1 basically. 1 Saxon housecarl and 1 Viking freeman were killed. So now I'm going to start by doing the fight between Hardrada and the Saxon housecarl. So a lot of 6s there, 3 6s, 2 of them for Hardrada, 1 for the housecarl, so we re-roll those. 2 5s there now, and the Hardrada dice just comes out on top, so he has to beat a defence of 5 as well. 4 + 1 for the shield, and he gets a 2, so the housecarl just gets pushed back an inch. Right, now I'll work out the dice for the other fight, which is going to be interesting there, between Howard Godwinson and all the Vikings around him who are trying to cut him down. Okay, so this is the dice. The orange dice are the 4 attack dice of Harold Godwinson. He gets +1 to those dice rolls. He's surrounded by 4 Viking raiders with swords. So that is 2 dice here, 2 dice each, so that's 8 dice in total. There are 6 white, which are +1. There are 2 yellow, which are also +1, but in the case of the yellow one, that particular Viking raider also has a spear in the other hand, so he has 2 weapons, which means that he can re-roll one of those dice. And then in the background are 2 spearmen who contribute, because the spear has a reach. They're behind the Viking raiders, but they can reach in, so they each contribute a dice with no modifiers. So it's +1 to the whites and orange, +1 to the yellow with a re-roll, and nothing, no modifier on the purple. Right, so we can take out all the 6s that match off, and the 5s, because they go up to 6s on the white dice, and the yellow dice as well, because they were +1, so there's no need for a re-roll with those. Everything else has been negated, so we re-roll all those dice. So we're re-rolling 6 dice for the Vikings, 2 dice for Harold. All of them now are +1, and also the yellow gets a chance to re-roll. So there's a 5 there, balanced by a 5 there. Everything else will be negated, but one of these yellows we can re-roll in the hope of getting either a 5 or a 6. No. So we have to re-roll those 2 off against one another. So it's all come down to 1 dice against 1 dice. And the Vikings just get it, 3 against 2. Okay, so that means that roll to see if we wound. We need successful dice. It needs to be a 6. No, it's only a 5. So this then becomes a desperate fight, in that Harold Godwinson can't withdraw from this. He lost in the melee but can't withdraw. So he gets an additional attack dice with the same modifiers, but his defence is now down by 1, so it would be 5s and 6s to wound him. Okay, so there are, again, we'll just take the 6s out to begin with, and then the 5s become 6s because it's +1 modifier. So that's 3 dice against 1 to re-roll. And again, the yellow dice can be re-rolled if it fails. So this time there's a 6 against a 5, which goes up to 6, and I can try and re-roll that yellow one to see if I can get a 6. No. So it's now 1 dice against 1 again. And the Viking wins again. So this time I need 5 or 6 to wound. No, fail. So Harold lost the melee again. So once again he gets an additional attack dice. So he's now rolling 6 attack dice. But his defence has now gone down 1 more. So it'll be 4 5s or 6s to wound him. Oh, he's done really well here. 1, 2, 3 6s. The Vikings have no 6s, but they do have a 5 on one of those dice that you can modify up. So they're still in the game, but it's 3 against 1 now in terms of dice in favour of Harold Godwinson. And Harold wins it because 6 beats the 4, but the 2 and the 1 don't. So he's got 1 successful strike. I think he's going to strike against the Viking that's got the spear and the shield, because they've all got the. I believe they've all got. Oh no, yeah. He because he's not holding a shield, he will have a lower defense. So what would he be? Let me find him on the chart. He's only got a defense of 3, so 4, 5 or 6 will kill him, as he's only got 1 health. And it's only a 3, so he's not killed, but at this point Harold won that melee, and the figures around him do have the ability to withdraw. If there's a supporting figure behind, they have to withdraw as well. If there were 2 supporting figures behind, then they have to stay and fight. So we just basically move everything back an inch, and overall it was 1-1, so there's no morale or anything like that to check for. So we're on to the next round. Well, the Vikings won priority, and that was crucial because what Hardrada was able to do was give a group command to everything that was within 6 inches of him, which very conveniently, as long as all the figures that move when he moves as well end up within 6 inches of him at the end of the movement as well, then that's fine. So this Saxon housecarl here is being confronted by this Viking raider, who is only about 2 inches away from Hardrada. These figures here have blocked off the end of the bridge to stop any help coming from the bridge, and Godwinson and Hardrada are fighting one another. Hardrada is the weaker of the two now because he only has 1 health, whereas Godwinson has 4, but there are another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 figures fighting on each side of Harold Godwinson, confining him in, making it a desperate fight for him. So that's going to be, this could be the culmination of the battle. Let's see how it goes. In the fighting that's going on around that important melee then, the Saxon housecarl got pushed back, lost the melee but wasn't killed. At the end of the bridge, one Viking was pushed back and another Viking was killed. So at the moment there is a 1-0 benefit to the Anglo-Saxons in terms of calling morale. But I'm now going to roll for all this on camera. If Harold survives, then he'll be able to call down a morale check on the Vikings. If he dies, then that's the end of the game. That's Harold Godwinson, that is, not Harold Hardrada. So I'll do all that on camera now. Okay, so Harold Godwinson is rolling 4 dice plus 1, so he'll be the orange dice. Harold Hardrada only has 3 dice plus 1, but there are 3 other raiders around him who all have 2 dice each on plus 1. One of them, which I'll make the yellow dice, can re-roll. And then there are 2 spears, which I'm going to call the purple dice, which haven't got any modifiers. So it's not looking good for Harold Godwinson. That goes, the 3s go up to 4. So 6 would beat it. That white 4 will beat it because it goes up to 5. The 5 will beat it. That's it. So there are 3 successful hits on Harold Godwinson. This turn round it needs 6s to overcome his armour. No, so we go into another round of combat where Harold Godwinson is rolling an additional dice with the same modifier of plus 1, but his defence has gone down 1. Okay, now here there are quite a lot of 6s, which one have to re-roll. I forgot to re-roll the yellows before as well. There's a 6 from the spear there. Any orange or white 5s will go up to 6. And I can re-roll one of those yellow in the hope of getting a 5 or a 6. No. So it's 3 dice against 3, re-rolling. Okay, so the 5 from the spear supporting is the top roll. That 4 goes up to a 5 as well. None of the other dice are equivalent. So now I've got 2 dice rolling against Harold Godwin, so needing a 5 or a 6 to wound. No, so once again we go into another round of combat with an additional orange dice on a plus 1. And again, lots of 6s, so 2 yellow 6s, so I don't need to re-roll those. Purple 6, an orange 6 for Godwinson, a white 6 there. The white 5 goes up to 6, the orange 5 goes up to 6. So that's everything that's going to count that needs to be re-rolled. So we're rolling 5 dice against 2 now. There's an orange 6 and an orange 5 which will go up to 6. And the only white successful one there is the white 5 which will go up to 6. But I can re-roll one of those yellows in the hope of getting a 5 or a 6. No. So now it's 2 dice against 1. And Harold Godwinson wins easily. So now he is rolling 2 dice against the Vikings, and he's obviously going to pick Hardrada, who only has 1 life left. So if he rolls a 6 with either of these 2 dice, Hardrada is dead and the game is won. Yes, he does. So that's it, game over. So there we are, Hardrada, cut down by Harold Godwinson, who's beset on all sides, but hacked his way through that throng in order to get to his objective and take down Harold Hardrada. In the actual historical battle, Hardrada was meant to have been shot through the throat with an arrow, but this was a more heroic death. The downfall really came from that business of fighting single-handed combat with a housecarl who did him a lot of wounds, did him a lot of damage. But anyway, it was a good fun game. I love the way it does seem to balance out and create all these dramatic, tense moments. I mean, you can see from that dice rolling how to and fro the actual dice rolling is as well. It's not a simple matter of just rolling some dice that matched off against one another. You're adding factors and you're adding dice as the melee goes on. Really, I just think it's such a brilliant game. I think it's better than Pillage, but that's not to say that Pillage isn't a good game. I think Pillage is kind of more limited in one respect, in that it does tend to concentrate on pillage, on looting and ransacking. It means the scenarios, although you can change the factions and you can change the terrain, the scenarios are all going to be very similar and repetitive in one way. The advantage Pillage has over Brethren is probably you can have larger scale battles. There's less intricacy in it, so the game flows more quickly. But if like me, you're mainly a solo player, you've got the time to indulge yourself and immerse yourself in the game. And Brethren has got such depth and such intricacy to it that it really does draw you in, and you get excited about all the little individual fights and combats and so on that are going on the table. Anyway, that's my battle report. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much for watching, and see you on the next video. Bye for now.